Tonight on the Late Debate. Ripping up the rules on council homes. Labour eyes up big changes which could make properties harder to buy.
I think everyone has a right to buy a house. Council with a discount because you've paid the rent. You know, you've been living in, say for instance, for 10 years, you've lived in that house, you've paid a lot into that house in rent.
Also tonight, big police cuts could be on the way. How can London stay safe if thousands of officers disappear? And Labour plays with its own train set, but don't expect cheaper tickets, and will trains really run on time?
I don't think that it's a very good idea. I think it will give the rail unions more power.
Hello and welcome to the Late Debate. The dream of home ownership could be snatched away from thousands of council tenants under a big shake-up by Labour. The government is worried people are buying properties much faster than new ones are being built. New rules could dampen demand for Margaret Thatcher's flagship policy from the 1980s. Emily has been a council tenant for more than 30 years. She lives in a 3-bed terrace at Sunbury-on-Thames with 6 of her 8 children and wants to exercise her right to buy.
Oh, it's always been my dream to buy a house. I am going to college and university, so when I get a job, then my son works full-time, so between us we'll be able to afford it.
Don't you think this is lovely? And the trouble Mrs Patterson's taken with it.
It's almost 45 years since Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had tea with the Pattersons at their house in Harold Hill in East London. It marked the start of the Conservatives' right-to-buy revolution.
Since the introduction of the Right to Buy scheme, we've sold off more than 2 million council properties, and at the expense of what? Now we currently have 1.4 million people waiting for a social home.
Now the Right to Buy discount enjoyed by the Pattersons and many of their neighbours has been cut. In London, it's been set at £16,000, down from £136,000. And tenants might have to wait up to 10 years before they're eligible, instead of 3.
We said that people should be able to buy their home if they've lived in it and raised their family in it for many years. But currently, we think people get that discount far too soon.
Critics of Right to Buy argue successive governments have failed to build enough new council homes to replace those sold off.
We are losing far more homes than we're building at the moment in terms of social rent. But we need at least 90,000 social rented homes every single year for the next 10 years. And the government has an opportunity at the spending review to invest in a new generation of social housing.
But the proposed changes haven't killed Emily's dream.
Eventually, we'd like to extend to make it bigger because we've got quite a large family, and then maybe one day move. I also think that this is an insurance, my pension fund really. So obviously eventually sell it and, you know, get a smaller place, and that's my pension fund.
For more than 4 decades, council tenants have been given a helping hand to get on the property ladder. It's about to become a little harder. Joining me now to discuss that are my guests tonight. For Labour, Anne Clarke from the London Assembly. For the Conservatives, Romford MP Andrew Rosindell. And for the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Harpenden and Berkhamsted, Victoria Collins. Welcome all of you. Anne, what's more important to Labour? Social tenants being able to own their own homes or more social housing?
I think what's clear is we need more social housing, and that's been true for some time. And the reason that this is coming to a head with Right to Buy is we're losing more homes to Right to Buy than we're building. And so there's a large gap right now. And I know that we need to be building those social homes. We're starting to build them in London, but we need social homes right across the country, and we need to pick up the pace of building them.
Does Labour have anything against home ownership?
Absolutely not. I mean, home ownership, I'm a homeowner, lots of people are homeowners, and Labour do support home ownership, absolutely. And, you know, we saw Emily early on, and one of the things that's being proposed by the Labour government is people who've lived in their social homes for a long time, you know, even we just had Angela Rayner say that people like Emily would still be able to buy her home under Right to Buy. But it is right to start consulting on this.
Andrew, is Maggie spinning in her grave?
Well, when Margaret Thatcher came to Romford and the first council house, she handed over the keys. This was the start of a revolution, a home ownership revolution, giving the average person the opportunity to own their own home, to have a stake in their future, to hand something down to their children, and to have mobility, because if you own your home, you can sell it and move somewhere different. So that's now being watered down, and I think it's a very detrimental step. I think that the principle of home ownership is something we should all be supporting. So what the government are now doing are making it very difficult for a family that works hard, pays rents, looks after their home, treats it like their own. They want to buy it. They're making it hard to do that. So I think it's a very retrograde step.
Why have councils failed to build enough new social homes?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, the Conservatives left us with a housing crisis, an absolute mess.
But this has been going on for decades, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, but the Conservatives have also been out of power for decades and didn't set us up for success. But I mean, for example, I mean, the Liberal Democrats are very bold in having a target of 150,000 social homes that need to be built. And actually been quite disappointed we didn't see that in Labour's policy declaration on planning. So they need to be bolder about that too.
Do you think the cut in the discount is going to particularly harm home tenants in London who want to buy? I mean, that's a huge drop from a £136,000 discount to £16,000.
Well, the cost of housing in London generally is just very, very high. So the drop in the discount across the country, at least, let's bear in mind this is at proposal stage. There's an open consultation on it as we speak. I think that actually, look, the main thing is that this is going to allow councils to retain, more social homes, which haven't, the country's failed to build enough of them. Mm-hmm. We need that housing stock. We desperately need it. So in terms of home ownership, I think we need to see a rise in social homes. We need to see a rise in affordable homes at the same time as well.
Do you accept, Andrew, that the Conservatives got it wrong with not building enough homes to replace those that were sold to tenants?
All governments should have prepared for the future, but the reality is the population has exploded in London. It used to be 6 million, it's more like 10 million, even more than that. So, of course, there's going to be a need to build new homes. What we shouldn't be doing is take away opportunities from working people who work very hard to own their own home, and now Labour's taking away that opportunity ladder for them. I think a lot of families will find it very difficult now to buy their council home. I think it's a very sad day for those who want to better the lives of their own families.
We heard today from the government about plans to shake up the planning rules to allow more building on the green belt, new targets for house building, but nothing specifically about social housing. Why was that?
Well, it's clear that we need to overall build more social housing and more housing. We do have social housing targets here in London that the Mayor of London's delivering on. But
when you say
speaking,
delivering on, they've just upped it to dropped it to 88,000. But even the housing minister, acknowledged that London has failed to get to half that so far. Well, it's a lot of houses to build.
There's a lot of houses to build, but so far, Sadiq had housing targets in the previous government as well, and he always met and indeed surpassed his housing targets. And the main thing is, overall, across the country, we're short about 1.5 million homes, and that's the big issue here. We have a real shortage of homes across the country and in our capital as well.
Can your party embrace the idea of building 1.5 million new homes in the next 5 years?
Well, look, the Mayor's been a complete failure, so the Conservative Party needs to do better, but the Mayor of London promised a lot of things which he's failed to deliver on. But what he's actually doing is taking away the opportunity of boroughs like mine to make their own local policies on housing. I'd much rather Havering Council decide developments for Havering than I would the Mayor of London sitting in City Hall, who's completely out of touch with the constituents of Romford.
I mean, what I'd follow up on that is the Conservative government had a top-down approach to planning that forced that on local authorities. Unfortunately, Labour have followed that suit. And so I've been quite disappointed in that, to see that. But also what we've got to get back to is the problem we're trying to solve is that people can't afford their homes or to buy their first homes. So it's not just about building 1.5 million homes, it's the right ones. And that's why I think there should be bolder mandates on social housing.
Victoria, your party, the Lib Dems, famously won the Cheshire by-election by promising not to build new homes. Are you going to be NIMBYs?
Oh, I mean, there are so many Lib Dem councils that actually build. I mean, you've got those in Kingston, in Southwark that have themselves built many housing and affordable social housing. So there's a lot of evidence that we're not NIMBYs. We just want to get it right and build the right houses in the right place.
And is there going to be a big battle over designating green belt, grey belt?
So a thing what's clear from the government is looking at grey belt, brown belt, all these different belts. But what's in simple terms, the government is asking local authorities and local councils to identify this land where homes can be built. Things like brown belt, this is industrial space. It's railway sidings, places like that. And grey belt is, it can be disused petrol stations. It can be, things that are not high quality and are inside the green belt.
You've got an outer London seat. There must be parts of your constituency where there is land that can be built on that won't eat into the green belt.
Well, we're very much Essex, really. And if you come to Romford, you'll see lots of green fields and open spaces. And we want to protect our green belt. I think my constituents are very worried that under this Labour government, we're going to see building over our green and pleasant land. So I'll be fighting against that. But I do believe in flexibility where there's land that could potentially be released for housing in character with the area, then I would support that. What I don't want to see is tower blocks being built in towns like Romford. It's a town and country borough, not in a London.
OK, well, the Met is having big problems balancing the books, which mean thousands of officers could be cut. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley is facing a £450 million black hole, and the only way out might be to shrink Britain's biggest force. Departments, including the flying squad, intelligence and forensics, could all feel the squeeze.
This is an actual reduction. This isn't about sort of clearing out vacancies or anything like that. This is an actual reduction in the headcount of those policing London by 2,300 officers from where we anticipate landing on the 31st of March next year through to 31st of March the following year.
And as part of Sir Keir Starmer's relaunch recently, we were promised a named police officer in every borough. Is this a case of you going back on manifesto promises if the Met has to cut 2,300 cops?
So in the plan for change that Labour laid out, that they did indeed do that. But I think what's important here is these proposals are, this is looking at springtime. Sadiq Khan, clearly Mark Rowley out there batting back, trying to secure police for London. The previous government cut policing in half, and with Sadiq as mayor, he was able to, he paid more, I think 92% more, and London had 1,300 more police officers than were, paid for by government. So I think what we do...
That's all very good, but if he's going to have to cut 2,300, it's a backward step.
I appreciate that, but right now we've got a inspector in every borough, which is new. That wasn't before. We've got in local policing, there's now 4 police officers in every council ward. Some councils actually have slightly more than that per ward. Plus, there's also there's the local inspector. And so there's been a real push by Mark Rowley and the mayor to have local community policing. If this does come to pass, I do know that we have a mayor and a commissioner who will do everything to keep as many police officers as we
Victoria, this doesn't just affect the Met. There are forces in the home counties also touched by this. They're all waiting for the settlement from the government next week. Do you sense that the commissioner might be scaremongering here to try to get a few more bucks?
What is clear though is there is a crisis in community policing, and I think it's right that they're shouting, say we've got to get this right, and our communities are suffering. And I will be there to hold Labour to account to make sure that delivers, and that we're not taking with one hand and giving away with another.
Andrew, Boris Johnson promised more police. We've got fewer police now than we had some time ago, and it's not just because of Sadiq Khan. Boris Johnson started to cut neighbourhood policing. That's something you've got to accept.
So I disagree with the policies of all the parties that have decided this over the years. It's a huge mistake reducing police numbers in the London region. But in areas like mine, we really suffer because we're funding Inner London. All the police are in Inner London on protests and dealing with all the crime in the inner part of the city. And areas like my constituency are hard done by. We're not getting the police cover we pay for. So this 10% cut is what we're talking about, Sir Mark Rowley. That's going to be devastating on boroughs like mine. We're already losing the police cover that we need. Now it's going to be far worse. So Sadiq Khan has a lot to answer for his mismanagement of the police service in London.
Does he?
Look, Sadiq Khan has, despite the cut from national government, when the Conservatives were in office, Sadiq uplifted the police across London. I think, you know, crime rose across the whole country during the Conservatives, and I think for the Conservatives to always blame Sadiq Khan feels a bit rich to me.
The Mayor was very vocal about government cuts when the Conservatives were in power. Do you think we're going to hear the same loud voice from City Hall if the current government cuts police funding?
Yeah, and I think the real difference is, right now we've got a Mayor of London who actually speaks to, who the government will speak to him. He's meeting with ministers. Before, I remember sitting in the London Assembly and the Mayor was writing to government ministers who wouldn't respond. So it's a very different relationship, and I think it's a working relationship.
Andrew, do you think we've got scaremongering by the Commissioner here, or is it for real?
Well, look, he's obviously going to fight to get the best possible resources to do the job, but we know the Met is already stretched. We know in the outer Greater London areas like mine, we lost all of our police stations except the main ones. We don't see the bobbies on the beat like we were promised. The community, you're right, Victoria, community policing is in crisis. But, you know, I say to Anna, you know, it's fine if you're in Camden, you get police round there. You come to Romford or Hornchurch or Collier Row, you won't see the police. Even if you report a crime, you can barely get them to come out. So this is unfair system. Outer London is paying for inner London, and my constituents have just about had enough.
Do you see many police in Berkhamsted?
Sadly not. When I do see them, they're very nice, but there's not enough of them.
OK, well, if there's one Christmas present Londoners really want, it's a rail service that runs on time. Labour thinks it can do that by taking control of the network, starting with South Western Railway next year. But will nationalisation stop delays, rising costs and cuts to services? Not everyone is convinced.
I don't think that it's a very good idea. I think it will give the rail unions more power than they actually warrant.
They're unreliable, we're always moaning about them, so we're hoping the nationalisation is going to be a good thing.
I think it's fantastic. It's about time that we got the profits from the rails companies back into our own country and not for other countries.
It's delayed, it's expensive, so I would be very interested to know what we as passengers would get if it's nationalised.
Victoria, what do commuters from Berkhamsted want?
Better trains, for sure, and much better prices. I mean, we're half an hour outside of central London, but it's £30. A £30 return for a 30-minute journey. That's just ridiculous. But so we're calling for the better pricing, better service, and also more regular service too.
I think your commuters are going to have to wait a bit longer for the cheaper tickets, because we know that fares are going up by 4.6% on the railways in March. The new Transport Secretary has made it clear that fare cuts are not on the agenda with nationalisation. We'll find out probably tomorrow what the Mayor's planning to do with fares for Transport for London. But if people can't expect cheaper fares, what are they going to get from rail nationalisation?
Well, a number of things. And I think, you know, we know that most people think it's the right policy. It means that rather than your fares going to support bonuses of shareholders of railway companies, or indeed other countries who have ownership of some of our network, instead that's going to be reinvested in our railway. What I think we can really look forward to is more reliability and more fair structure, because actually right now it depends on the time of day, it depends on all sorts of things, and when you travel and how far out you book it, and you end up with this very chaotic fare structure. And I think we can regularise the fees and really bring more normalcy to a service that so many people rely on.
Andrew, you have to acknowledge that opinion polls do show that the majority of people in this country like the idea of a nationalised railway system.
Well, they do. But it's not right. Actually, if you analyse the public sector and how good they are at running public services, they're not as good as if you put the private sector into the equation, because the private sector invests billions of pounds, as they have done, into our railways. Where's that coming from? The taxpayer is now going to be funding all of this. We always knew that nationalised state-run monopolies are inefficient, very expensive, waste a lot of money, and that very sensible lady you had on a minute ago, she's absolutely right. The trade unions are going to be pulling the strings again. So I look forward to the fare reductions. I look forward to the trains being run on time, but I wouldn't hold your breath if I was you, Simon.
The new Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, is a former Deputy Mayor for London, Deputy Mayor for Transport for London under Sadiq Khan. Does that reassure you, or does that alarm you?
Well, look, we all agree that we need improvements to our railways. We all agree that there are issues with them, and none of us have the perfect answer to any of it. So I welcome the fact that she is now the Transport Secretary. She's got a lot of experience in that field. But I don't think that nationalisation is the answer to all of our problems. I would prefer to see the private sector play a central role, but with government cooperation. Ownership in the public sector very rarely produces better results.
We're promised Jam tomorrow when Great British Railways comes into being, but we already know that there's a dispute in the Department for Transport over when that should be. The last Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, wanted it to happen quite quickly. The current Permanent Secretary suggested it might take a couple of years. Have you any idea when it's all going to get better for commuters?
Well, to put an exact date, what we're seeing though is as the contracts come to an end is when there's conversations happening now, and that's a very live conversation. But just getting back to Heidi Alexander being appointed, I did have the enormous privilege to work with her when she was Deputy Mayor for Transport. And if Sadiq can deliver frozen fares in London year on year on year, I think that bodes very well for a train network under Heidi Alexander.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see whether he's going to be able to continue delivering frozen fares after the last Transport Secretary told him he must increase them by 4.6%. Victoria, a lot of people from your constituency come into Euston. We know there have been a lot of problems at Euston. Louise Haigh promised to take responsibility and get it sorted. Have you seen any sign of it getting better?
Absolutely not. And I also cover the Thames link. I mean, I have commuter after commuter in my inbox saying, why is this such a terrible service? And that's what, I mean, we would like it to improve. And what needs to be at the core of that is the passenger. So, for example, as Lib Dems, we're quite cautious about the speed of moving into nationalisation. And also there have been these delays. And what we said was there should be a national rail authority that really starts to hold everyone to account and deliver for the passenger, including those coming into Euston.
And you represent Camden.
I do, yeah.
That's Euston's in Camden. Have you seen any sign of the overcrowding problems getting any better at Euston? And do you think Heidi Alexander will get a grip of it?
So I think Heidi Alexander will get a grip of it. I mean, what we have seen is immediately Louise Haigh got all the advertising lights switched off, which has, you know, to my mind, actually, it does sort some of the issue. It's not quite so in your face. I think things are moving along. I mean, Euston, there's a lot going on. It's a very, very busy station that's long overdue a regeneration, to be honest.
Thank you very much to all my guests tonight. That's all we've got time for this week and for this year. So thank you to Anne Clarke, to Andrew Rosindell and Victoria Collins. We're back in the new year with another season of The Late Debate. Until then, good night, thank you for watching and have a very happy Christmas. And thank you.